I'm gonna keep fighting for the rest of my life to find these kids.
What if I told you that a simple dog bark would expose one of the most disturbing family secrets in recent memory? That a grandmother's desperate search for truth would uncover a web of lies so complex it would shake an entire community to its core? This is the story of Jack and Lilly Sullivan, two innocent children who vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions, betrayal, and a family torn apart by secrets. If cases like this grip you the way they grip me, make sure you hit that subscribe button now, because what you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about family, loyalty, and the lengths people will go to protect the ones they love. Friday morning started like any other in the small Canadian community where 4-year-old Jack and 6-year-old Lilly Sullivan lived with their mother, Malaya Brooks Murray. The children were supposed to be getting ready for school, their backpacks packed, their breakfast eaten. But they never made it to the bus stop. They never made it anywhere. By 9:40 a.m., according to their mother's account, the children had simply vanished.
Gone.
As if they had never existed at all. The official story was heartbreakingly simple. 2 young children had wandered off into the dense woods surrounding their home. Search teams were mobilized. Volunteers combed through miles of forest. Dogs tracked scents that led nowhere. But here's what the public didn't know, what nobody knew until recently. That morning, there was a witness. Someone who heard everything. Someone who saw the truth unfold in real time. Her name was Janie, and she lived in a trailer on the same property as Malaya and her boyfriend, Daniel Martel. Janie was Daniel's mother, and she was supposed to be away that morning. Malaya thought she was alone with her children. She thought no one would see, no one would hear, but Janie was there. And her dog that barked at everything unusual, that dog heard what happened next. At approximately 6:30 a.m., Janie was awakened by frantic barking. Through the thin walls of her trailer, she could hear children's voices. Lily's voice, high and scared, letting out what witnesses later described as a little screaming thing. Jack's voice, confused and frightened, saying something she couldn't quite make out. Then came the sound of movement. Footsteps. The unmistakable rhythm of an adult guiding small children. Janie heard them walking, not toward the woods, not toward the school bus stop, but toward the driveway. She heard them leave through the back door, move past the fence, and head toward the road. The night before, Janie had been working on the driveway. Rain had created potholes, and she'd used a shovel to fill them with fresh gravel. The ground was soft, muddy, not quite settled. It was in this exact spot that investigators would later find a single, small boot print. A child's boot print, pressed deep into the soft earth. The same spot where the scent dogs lost the trail completely. This wasn't random. This wasn't children wandering off to play. This was deliberate. This was planned. And the person who planned it knew exactly what they were doing. But here's the most chilling part of all. When Janie stepped outside just moments later, she found Malaya standing in the yard, holding baby Meadow on her hip, staring down at her phone. There was no urgency in her posture, no panic in her eyes. When Janie asked, "Where are the kids?" Malaya didn't hesitate. She didn't look confused or worried. She simply said, "They're in the woods." 20 minutes, she claimed. They'd been gone for 20 minutes. But Janie had just heard their voices. She had just heard them being led away. The timeline didn't match. The story didn't add up. And somewhere in that discrepancy lay the truth that would tear this family apart forever. What happened next would challenge every assumption about this case. Because the person who should have been looking for these children, the person who should have been desperate to find them, was the very person who knew exactly where they were. Daniel Martel never expected to become the center of one of Canada's most controversial missing children cases. At 28, he was a quiet man who spent his free time making Pokemon videos for his small YouTube channel. He wasn't Jack and Lily's biological father, but he had lived with them and their mother for years. In many ways, he was the only father figure they had ever known. From the moment the children disappeared, Daniel's behavior raised red flags. During televised interviews, he would smile at inappropriate times, a slight smirk that viewers found disturbing. When asked about his feelings, he talked more about his own emotional state than about the missing children. "I've been searching," he would say. "If I have to, I'll search for the rest of my life." But there was something unsettling about that statement. Something that made people wonder. Why did it sound like he already knew he would never find them alive? The suspicion surrounding Daniel wasn't just about his awkward demeanor or his inappropriate facial expressions. There were deeper concerns. Allegations surfaced that Jack had returned from Daniel's care with unexplained bruises and scratches. While these claims were never substantiated and Daniel vehemently denied them, they planted seeds of doubt that would grow into a forest of suspicion. Daniel's communication patterns only fueled the fire. When Belinda, the children's grandmother, reached out to him desperately seeking answers, he would read her messages but never respond. This silence wasn't just absence, it was personal. To a grandmother frantically searching for her grandchildren, his refusal to engage felt like cruelty. Some observers began to theorize that Daniel might be neurodivergent. His mannerisms were often described as childlike, emotionally flat, awkward. He struggled with eye contact and had difficulty expressing appropriate emotional responses. His Pokemon YouTube channel, while harmless, reinforced an image of someone who was emotionally underdeveloped, hardly the profile of a stable father figure. But perhaps most damning of all was Daniel's role in the initial search efforts. He joined volunteers combing through the woods, calling out the children's names until his voice was hoarse. He appeared on camera, pleading for information, begging for the children's safe return. He even offered to take a polygraph test to prove his innocence. What the public didn't know, what nobody knew until recently, was that Daniel was lying. Not just about small details, but about the fundamental nature of what happened that morning. He knew the children hadn't wandered into the woods. He knew they hadn't gotten lost. He knew exactly what had happened to them. And yet, he continued to perpetuate the lie, sending search teams into the forest on a wild goose chase while precious time ticked away. Time that could have been used to find Jack and Lilly when they might still have been recoverable. Why would someone do this? Why would someone who claimed to love these children deliberately mislead the people trying to save them? The answer, when it finally came, would be more heartbreaking than anyone could have imagined. Because Daniel Martel wasn't protecting himself. He wasn't covering up his own crimes. He was protecting the woman he loved, even as that protection may have sealed the fate of 2 innocent children forever. The question that haunts this case isn't just what happened to Jack and Lilly Sullivan. It's how love, real, genuine, desperate love, can become so twisted that it transforms protectors into accomplices and silence into the deadliest weapon of all. To understand what happened to Jack and Lilly Sullivan, you have to understand their mother, Malaya Brooks Murray. To the outside world, she appeared to be a devoted parent, a young woman trying to build a life for her 3 children. But behind closed doors, a different story was unfolding, one of trauma, control, and a slow psychological unraveling that nobody saw coming. The problems began almost immediately after the birth of Malaya's youngest child, Meadow. According to Daniel's recent revelations, Malaya developed severe postpartum depression, but she hid it from everyone. No one knew, Daniel would later confess, but her postpartum depression started right after Meadow was born. For an entire year, Malaya was constantly ranting about trauma, as Daniel described it. She would spiral into intense emotional states, reliving past hurts, unable to process or regulate her responses. Daniel admitted he often had to tell her to stop, not out of cruelty, but because he was helpless to watch her suffer. The trauma Malaya was processing wasn't just related to childbirth. She had endured significant psychological abuse from Jack and Lilly's biological father, experiences that left deep emotional scars. She can hold it together for a while, Daniel observed, but she crashes when her mental health is tested. This pattern of emotional instability became the backdrop for everything that followed. Malaya's mental health wasn't just fragile, it was conditional, dependent on external circumstances remaining stable. When pressure mounted, when stress increased, when her carefully constructed world began to crack, she would collapse. But perhaps most disturbing of all was Daniel's observation about Malaya's relationship with her children. According to him, Meadow was the only one she ever really loved. The bond between Malaya and Jack and Lilly was distant, sometimes even cold. Daniel claimed he was the one who provided their daily care, cooking their meals, helping with homework, tucking them in at night. "They loved me more than they ever loved her," Daniel wrote in leaked messages that would later surface. It was a heartbreaking admission that painted a picture of two children who had found love and stability with someone who wasn't even their biological father, while their actual mother remained emotionally distant. This dynamic becomes crucial when you consider what happened next. Because if Malaya truly felt disconnected from Jack and Lilly, if she saw them as burdens rather than blessings, then her actions that Friday morning begin to make a terrible kind of sense. The family system surrounding Malaya was complex and controlling. Her mother, Cindy, appeared to wield significant influence over her daughter's decisions. Daniel would later claim that Cindy was pulling the strings, controlling Malaya's movements, silencing her, and keeping her isolated. He accused the family of not just shielding Malaya from scrutiny, but of being actively involved in covering up what happened. In this environment of control and manipulation, Malaya wasn't just a mother making decisions for her children. She was a woman caught between competing loyalties, struggling with mental health issues, and increasingly isolated from the outside world. Her agency was compromised, her judgment clouded, and her ability to protect her children fatally impaired. But there's another layer to this story that makes it even more tragic. Malaya was facing the very real possibility of losing custody of her children. The pressure was mounting, the scrutiny was increasing, and her fragile mental state was beginning to crack under the weight of it all. In her mind, she may have believed she was protecting Jack and Lilly from a system that would tear them away from her. She may have convinced herself that whatever she was planning was better than the alternative. But protection and harm can look remarkably similar when viewed through the lens of untreated mental illness and family dysfunction. The tragedy isn't just that Jack and Lilly disappeared. It's that their disappearance was the inevitable result of a system that failed to protect them long before that Friday morning. A system that allowed a struggling mother to spiral into crisis without intervention, that enabled family members to control and manipulate rather than support, and that left two innocent children vulnerable to the very people who should have been their greatest protection. If you're still watching, I need you to brace yourself for what comes next. Because what Janie witnessed that morning will change everything you thought you knew about this case. Before we dive deeper into her testimony, make sure you're subscribed. This story is about to take turns you won't see coming. Janie Martell never intended to become a key witness in a missing children case. She was simply a mother living in a trailer on the same property as her son Daniel and his girlfriend Malaya. On the morning of April 27th, she was supposed to be away from home, staying with a boyfriend or visiting friends. Malaya believed she was alone with her children.
She thought no one would see.
No one would hear, but Janie was there. And her dog, a protective animal that barked at anything unusual, became the unwitting alarm system that would expose the truth. The first thing Janie heard was barking. Sharp, urgent barking that cut through the early morning silence and jolted her awake. But it wasn't just the barking that caught her attention. It was what came before it. The sound of children's voices, high and frightened, coming from the direction of Daniel and Malaya's home. "I heard Lilly let out a little screaming thing," Janie would later tell investigators. "But clearly loud enough to trigger the dog and wake me up." She also heard Jack's voice, confused and distressed, though she couldn't make out his exact words. Then came the sound of movement. Not the random, playful movement of children at play, but the deliberate, purposeful movement of someone guiding them. Janie recognized the rhythm. An adult walking with small children, the different cadences of their footsteps creating a pattern she knew well. "I heard them walking," she recalled. "I could hear Malaya taking the kids out the back door, outside the fence, onto the driveway." This wasn't speculation. This wasn't assumption. This was direct auditory evidence of what happened to Jack and Lilly Sullivan. They didn't wander off. They weren't lost. They were taken. And the person who took them was their own mother. But here's where the story becomes even more chilling. The night before, Janie had been working on the driveway. Spring rain had created potholes and soft spots, and she had used a shovel to fill them with fresh gravel. The ground was muddy, not quite settled, still soft from the recent weather. It was in this exact spot, the spot where Janie heard them walking, that investigators would later discover a single, small boot print. A child's boot print, pressed deep into the soft earth that Janie had disturbed just hours earlier. The print was clear, unmistakable, and heartbreaking in its innocence. Even more significant was what happened at this location during the official search. When professional search dogs were brought in to track the children's scent, they followed the trail to this exact spot at the beginning of the driveway. And there, the trail went cold. Completely cold. The dogs couldn't trace any scent beyond that point. In search and rescue operations, this typically means one thing. The missing persons were picked up by a vehicle. Someone was waiting there. Someone was ready to take them away. The implications are staggering. This wasn't a spontaneous act. This wasn't a moment of panic or confusion. This was premeditated. Someone had planned this. Someone had arranged for transportation. Someone had thought this through. But perhaps the most damning evidence came from Janie's direct confrontation with Malaya just minutes after hearing the children being led away. When Janie stepped outside and asked, "Where are the kids?" Malaya's response was immediate and rehearsed. "They're in the woods." There was no confusion in her voice. No panic. No desperate searching behavior. Just a simple statement of fact, except it wasn't fact. It was a lie, told with the kind of calm that only comes from preparation. When Janie pressed further, asking how long they'd been gone, Malaya answered without hesitation, 20 minutes. But Janie had just heard their voices. She had just heard them being led away. The timeline didn't match because the story wasn't true. What makes this even more disturbing is Malaya's behavior during this conversation. She wasn't frantically searching. She wasn't calling their names. She wasn't showing any of the urgent, desperate behavior you'd expect from a mother whose children had just wandered into dangerous woods. Instead, she was standing calmly in the yard, holding baby Meadow on her hip, staring down at her phone, as if she was waiting for something, as if she already knew how the story would end. Janie's testimony provides the missing piece of the puzzle that investigators needed. It proves that Jack and Lilly didn't disappear mysteriously. They weren't victims of a random abduction or a tragic accident. They were deliberately removed from their home by someone they trusted, someone who had access to them, someone who could lead them away without resistance. The question that remains is simple but horrifying. Where did they go when they reached the end of that driveway? Who was waiting for them? And what happened next? The most devastating revelation in the Jack and Lilly Sullivan case came not from investigators, not from forensic evidence, but from the mouth of the man who had been protecting their mother all along. Daniel Martel's confession would shatter every assumption about this case and expose the tragic cost of misplaced loyalty. When confronted directly about his role in the search efforts, Daniel admitted something that changed everything. "I still love Malaya, and I was trying to cover for her lie." Those words, spoken to investigator Darren Getty, represented more than just a confession. They were an admission that love had blinded him to the truth, that his feelings for a woman had taken precedence over the safety of two innocent children. Daniel knew the children hadn't wandered into the woods. He knew they hadn't gotten lost during innocent play. He knew exactly what had happened to them. And yet, for months, he had perpetuated a lie that sent search teams into the forest on a futile mission, wasting precious time and resources while the real trail grew cold. This wasn't just emotional confusion or panic-driven behavior. This was a calculated decision to obstruct justice, to protect someone he loved even when that protection potentially sealed the fate of Jack and Lilly forever. By the time Daniel was ready to tell the truth, it may have already been too late. The timeline that Daniel and Malaya presented to investigators was full of holes. They claimed they didn't notice the children were missing until 9:40 a.m., nearly mid-morning. For any parent of young children, this is almost impossible to believe. With Jack and Lilly being only 4 and 6 years old, and baby Meadow requiring constant attention, it's implausible that two adults could go that long without seeing or hearing from any of them. In homes with small children, silence isn't golden. It's terrifying. It usually means trouble. Yet both Daniel and Malaya maintained they remained unaware until nearly 10 a.m., a detail that casts serious doubt on their credibility. But the most damning evidence of their deception lies in their behavior that morning. Neither parent showed the frantic, desperate urgency you'd expect from caregivers who had just discovered their children were missing. There's no record of them immediately calling neighbors, alerting police, or taking swift action to locate the children. Instead, there was a strange calm, an almost resigned acceptance that something terrible had happened. This wasn't the behavior of parents discovering their children were in danger. This was the behavior of people who already knew exactly what had happened and were now trying to manage the aftermath. Daniel's protection of Malaya extended far beyond that morning. Throughout the investigation, he consistently deflected blame away from her, redirected suspicion toward other theories, and refused to confirm details that might have helped investigators verify their timeline. He existed in a gray area of cooperation, helpful enough to appear innocent, but not helpful enough to expose the truth. When asked directly about inconsistencies in Malaya's story, Daniel would dodge the questions, speaking in vague generalities that kept their narratives parallel but never quite aligned. This wasn't accidental. This was strategic protection, the kind that comes from deep emotional attachment and the desperate desire to shield someone you love from consequences. The tragedy of Daniel's position is that his love for Malaya, genuine, deep, and enduring, became the weapon that destroyed any chance of finding Jack and Lilly. His need to protect her overrode his obligation to protect them. His loyalty to the woman he loved cost 2 children their lives. But Daniel's confession also reveals something else, the power of truth to eventually surface, even when buried under layers of deception and misdirection. Love can make people do terrible things, but it can also eventually make them do the right thing. Daniel's willingness to finally speak the truth, even when it destroyed his relationship with Malaya, suggests that some part of him always knew that protecting her meant failing Jack and Lilly. The question that haunts this case isn't just what happened to those children. It's how someone who claimed to love them, someone who fed them, helped them with homework, tucked them in at night, could choose to protect their harm rather than prevent it. Love, it turns out, can be the most dangerous emotion of all when it's directed toward the wrong person at the wrong time. And sometimes, the people we trust most to protect our children are the very ones who will sacrifice them to save themselves. By June 2025, nearly 2 months after Jack and Lilly Sullivan vanished, the case had reached a breaking point. The official investigation seemed stalled, with no arrests, no charges, and no meaningful updates from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The public was growing frustrated, demanding answers that seemed to never come. Then, on a quiet evening in late June, everything changed. Daniel Martel, who had maintained relative silence for weeks, suddenly appeared in the chat of a live stream dedicated to finding the missing children. He wasn't scheduled to be there. No one had invited him. But there he was, typing under a username that matched his old YouTube account from 2012. What followed was an explosive revelation that shattered every assumption about this case. This wasn't the same Daniel who had given careful, measured interviews to the media. This was a man at the breaking point, desperate, angry, and finally ready to tell the truth. The catalyst for Daniel's outburst was deeply personal. His daughter Meadow was in danger. According to him, Malaya had violated Child Protective Services protocols by taking Meadow without the required 24/7 supervision. She wasn't just avoiding reporters or skipping court appearances. She was actively fleeing from the RCMP, and she had taken their daughter with her. She broke CPS protocols. Daniel typed frantically in the chat. Now Meadow is at risk of being taken. But it was worse than just protocol violations. According to Daniel, Malaya had threatened to kill herself if authorities tried to take Meadow from her. This wasn't just about hiding from accountability anymore. This was about immediate danger to an innocent child. Daniel's description of Malaya's mental state was chilling. He painted a picture of a woman completely unraveling, emotionally unstable, and acting out of pure desperation. The trigger, he claimed, wasn't just fear of losing Meadow, but the overwhelming pressure she faced from her own dark past and the mounting evidence against her. She started fleeing on June 17th, Daniel revealed. But she wasn't acting alone. According to him, Malaya's mother Cindy had been pulling the strings, controlling Malaya's movements, silencing her, and keeping her isolated. He accused the family of not just shielding Malaya from scrutiny, but of being actively involved in covering up what happened to Jack and Lilly. The accusations didn't stop there. Daniel claimed that the family had found Jack and Lilly and were hiding them. He even alleged that they had stolen 2 of his sweaters to plant evidence against him. These weren't vague suspicions. They were specific, pointed accusations that suggested a coordinated family conspiracy. But his harshest words were reserved for Malaya herself. He revealed that she had cut all contact with him, blocking his number, refusing to speak, even hanging up the phone when she heard his voice. He described a disturbing contradiction. Malaya had told RCMP officers that she felt safest when she was with him, but 5 minutes later, she left. "She couldn't stay around me," Daniel explained, "because she would crack. I would find out." This wasn't fear or grief driving her behavior. This was guilt and the desperate need to avoid the one person who knew her well enough to see through her lies. Perhaps most chilling of all was Daniel's description of what Malaya took when she fled. She only asked for the birth certificates, school photos, and 2 stuffed animals, he revealed. Everything else was still in her house. To Daniel, this detail was damning. It suggested that Malaya wasn't just running with Meadow. She was preparing to take all 3 children, and she was preparing to do it permanently. The implications were staggering. If Malaya had the birth certificates and school photos, she could establish new identities for the children. If she was planning to flee permanently, it suggested that Jack and Lilly might still be alive, hidden somewhere, waiting for their mother to complete her escape plan. But Daniel's revelations in that live stream went deeper than anyone expected. He described a pattern of behavior that had been building for months before the children disappeared. Malaya had been increasingly paranoid, convinced that someone was watching her, that people were plotting against her. She had started talking about taking the kids somewhere safe, long before that fateful morning in April. She kept saying they weren't safe. Daniel typed, his messages becoming more frantic as the live stream continued. She said there were people who wanted to hurt them. But when I asked who, she couldn't give me names. She couldn't explain why. The chat exploded with questions. Viewers demanded to know more about these mysterious threats. But Daniel's responses only raised more questions. According to him, Malaya had been receiving anonymous messages, threats that she claimed were directed at the children. She had shown him screenshots of text messages, but when he tried to trace the numbers, they led nowhere. "I think she was making it up," Daniel admitted in the chat. "I think she was creating reasons to justify what she was planning to do." This revelation transformed the entire understanding of the case. If Malaya had been planning to take the children long before they disappeared, if she had been creating fictional threats to justify her actions, then their disappearance wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. It was premeditated. But Daniel's appearance in the live stream wasn't calculated or strategic. It was the desperate act of a man who believed he was running out of time to save his daughter. He felt unheard by authorities, ignored by the system, and terrified that Meadow would disappear just like Jack and Lilly had. His decision to speak publicly, rather than go through official channels, suggested that he had already tried working with authorities and either received no response or didn't believe action was being taken fast enough. The live stream was his last resort, a way to make the situation public, to apply pressure, to force someone to act before it was too late. As the live stream continued, Daniel revealed more disturbing details about Malaya's behavior in the weeks before the children disappeared. She had been withdrawing money from their joint accounts, small amounts that wouldn't trigger alerts, but that added up to significant sums. She had been researching how to travel with children without proper documentation. She had been asking questions about how long it would take for missing persons reports to be filed. She was planning this for months, Daniel typed. "I should have seen it. I should have stopped her." The guilt in his words was palpable. Here was a man who had defended Malaya publicly, who had protected her from suspicion, who had even misled investigators to shield her from scrutiny. And now he was realizing that his protection had enabled her to hurt the very children he was trying to help. But the most shocking revelation came near the end of the live stream. Daniel claimed that Malaya had kept a journal, a detailed record of her thoughts and plans. And according to him, that journal was still in the house, hidden somewhere that only she knew about. If the police find that journal, he typed, they'll know everything. They'll know what she did, where she took them, why she did it. The question that remained was simple but terrifying. If Malaya was capable of making Jack and Lilly disappear, what would she do to protect her secret? And how far would she go to keep Meadow with her forever? But Daniel's live stream appearance did more than just provide new information. It fundamentally changed the narrative of the case. For the first time, he stepped out of the shadows and pointed directly at Malaya, not as a victim, but as a threat. Whether his allegations were true or not, the effect was undeniable. No one would ever look at her the same way again. As the live stream ended, one message from Daniel stood out above all others. I'm not going to let her take another child. I'm not going to let Meadow disappear too. The race was on. But was it already too late? The transformation of Malaya Brooks Murray from grieving mother to fugitive on the run reveals the most disturbing aspect of the Jack and Lilly Sullivan case. This wasn't just about two children who disappeared. This was about a woman whose grip on reality had become so tenuous that she was willing to risk everything, including her remaining child, to avoid facing the truth. According to Daniel's revelations, Malaya's flight from authorities began on June 17, 2025. But this wasn't a spontaneous decision born of panic. This was a calculated move by someone who knew the walls were closing in and was determined to escape before they collapsed completely. The immediate trigger for her flight was a violation of Child Protective Services protocols. Malaya was supposed to be under 24/7 supervision while caring for baby Meadow, a safety measure put in place due to concerns about her mental state and ability to provide adequate care. Instead of complying with these requirements, she chose to flee with Meadow, immediately putting both herself and her daughter at risk. But the decision to run wasn't just about avoiding CPS oversight. According to Daniel, Malaya had made a chilling threat. She would kill herself if authorities tried to take Meadow from her. This wasn't idle desperation. This was a mother who had already lost two children under mysterious circumstances, now threatening to destroy herself and potentially harm her remaining child rather than face accountability. The psychological profile that emerges from Daniel's accounts is deeply disturbing. He described a woman who can hold it together for a while, but crashes when her mental health is tested. This pattern of conditional stability meant that Malaya could appear normal, even nurturing, in low-stress situations. But when pressure mounted, when scrutiny increased, when her carefully constructed world began to crack, she would collapse completely. Daniel's most revealing insight came from his description of a brief but crucial conversation. Malaya had told RCMP officers that she felt safest when she was with him. But then, after spending just 5 minutes in an ambulance with her mother Cindy, she came out a different person. Whatever was said in that ambulance changed everything. Whatever control or influence Cindy wielded over her daughter was powerful enough to override even Malaya's stated feelings of safety and trust. This dynamic suggests that Malaya wasn't acting entirely on her own. She was being influenced, controlled, perhaps even manipulated by family members who had their own reasons for wanting the truth to remain hidden. The question becomes, was Malaya protecting herself, or was she protecting someone else? The items Malaya took when she fled are particularly telling. Birth certificates, school photos, and 2 stuffed animals, the bare minimum needed to establish new identities for children and provide comfort objects for a life on the run. She left everything else behind, suggesting that she wasn't planning to return. This wasn't temporary hiding. This was permanent escape. But perhaps most chilling of all is what these items suggest about Jack and Lily's fate. If Malaya took birth certificates and school photos for 3 children, it implies that she was planning to reunite with all of them. This supports the theory that Jack and Lilly might still be alive, hidden somewhere, waiting for their mother to complete her escape plan. The details of Malaya's flight become even more disturbing when viewed through the lens of her mental state. According to Daniel, she had been showing signs of severe paranoia for months before the children disappeared. She had become convinced that people were watching her, that government agencies were plotting against her family, that the only way to protect her children was to disappear completely. She started talking about going off the grid. Daniel revealed in follow-up interviews. She said the system was corrupt, that they would never let her keep her kids if they knew the truth about her past. But what truth was she hiding? Daniel's accounts suggest that Malaya's paranoia wasn't entirely unfounded. She had been involved in situations that could have attracted unwanted attention from authorities. There were incidents from her past that she had never fully explained, relationships that had ended badly, decisions that had consequences she was still trying to escape. The geography of Malaya's flight is also significant. According to Daniel, she was headed toward a reservation, a location that would provide both physical isolation and jurisdictional complications for law enforcement. Reservations often have complex relationships with federal and provincial authorities, making them attractive hiding spots for people trying to avoid legal consequences. But the choice of destination reveals something else about Malaya's mindset. She wasn't just running from the law. She was running toward something, toward people who would protect her, toward a community that would ask fewer questions and offer more shelter than mainstream society ever could. Daniel's inability to pursue them to this location reveals another layer of the story. "I can't go to the reservation," he admitted. "It's too dangerous for me now." This suggests that Malaya's flight wasn't just about avoiding authorities. It was about putting herself and Meadow in a location where Daniel couldn't follow, where his influence couldn't reach her. The tragedy of Malaya's situation is that her desperation to avoid losing Meadow may have guaranteed that outcome. By fleeing with her daughter, by violating CPS protocols, by threatening violence against herself, she transformed a custody dispute into a criminal matter. She turned protective services into law enforcement. She made the very thing she was trying to prevent, the loss of her child, inevitable. But there's another possibility that's even more disturbing. What if Malaya's flight wasn't about protecting Meadow at all? What if it was about silencing the one person who might eventually reveal what happened to Jack and Lilly? A 3-year-old child can't testify about what she saw or heard, but a 5-year-old might. A 10-year-old certainly could. The timeline of Malaya's deterioration is particularly revealing. According to Daniel, she had been relatively stable for months after the children disappeared. She had been cooperating with investigators, appearing at court hearings, following CPS protocols. But something changed in mid-June, something that triggered her flight and her complete breakdown. She got a phone call, Daniel revealed. After that call, she was different. She was terrified, desperate, like someone had just told her that her time was up. Who made that call? What did they say? And why did it trigger such a dramatic response? These questions remain unanswered, but they suggest that Malaya's flight wasn't just about avoiding immediate consequences. It was about avoiding something much worse, something that was coming whether she ran or not. The most disturbing aspect of Malaya's desperation is how it affected her relationship with Meadow. According to witnesses, she had become increasingly possessive of the child, refusing to let her out of her sight, becoming agitated when anyone else tried to care for her. This wasn't normal maternal protectiveness. This was the behavior of someone who saw her child as the last thing she had left to lose. But Daniel's accounts suggest that Malaya's possessiveness went beyond normal attachment. She had started talking about Meadow as if she were the only thing that mattered, as if Jack and Lilly had never existed. She had removed their photos from the house, stopped mentioning them in conversations, acted as if her family had always been just herself and Meadow. It was like she was trying to erase them, Daniel said. Like if she could just forget about Jack and Lilly, she could start over with Meadow and pretend none of this ever happened. This psychological splitting reveals the depth of Malaya's desperation. She wasn't just running from the consequences of what she had done. She was running from the reality of what she had lost, from the guilt of what she had caused, from the truth of who she had become. The question that haunts this case is whether Malaya's flight represents a mother's desperate attempt to protect her remaining child, or a criminal's calculated move to eliminate the last person who could expose her secrets. The answer may determine whether this story ends with a family reunification or with the disappearance of a third innocent child. But as authorities race to find Malaya and Meadow, one thing becomes increasingly clear: time is running out. Every day that passes makes it less likely that the story will have a happy ending. Every mile that Malaya puts between herself and the truth makes it harder to bring justice for Jack and Lilly Sullivan. The race is on. But in a case where nothing is as it seems, where every revelation only deepens the mystery. The question remains, will they find Malaya before she disappears forever? And when they do, will Meadows still be with her? In most missing children cases, physical evidence provides the foundation for understanding what happened. But the Jack and Lilly Sullivan case presents a puzzle where the most significant evidence isn't what investigators found, it's what they didn't find, and what that absence reveals about the truth. The polygraph results that emerged from the investigation created more questions than answers. According to Daniel, everyone who took the test passed, including himself. The questions focused specifically on death, whether the test subjects knew if the children were dead, whether they had caused their deaths, whether they had witnessed their deaths. Everyone passed. But here's what makes this result both significant and troubling. Polygraph tests can only measure deception about the specific questions asked. If the children weren't dead at the time of the test, if they had been hidden rather than killed, then technically accurate answers about death wouldn't register as deception. This raises a chilling possibility. What if Jack and Lilly were still alive when these tests were conducted? What if the entire investigation was based on the wrong premise, that the children had been killed, when in reality, they had simply been hidden? The physical evidence that did surface was equally puzzling. Daniel discovered a piece of a torn blanket in the trash, which he claimed had been dragged out by a bear or other animal. Later, Malaya's family reported finding that same piece of blanket high up in a tree. But here's what bothered Daniel. The family members who found it hadn't been involved in the actual search of that area. How did they know to look there? How did they know that specific piece of evidence was significant? And why did they wait so long to report finding it? The blanket fragment became a focal point of suspicion for Daniel. He believed it was planted evidence, part of a coordinated effort by Malaya's family to misdirect the investigation. But investigators faced a different problem. The blanket piece had been contaminated by weather, animals, and multiple handlers. Any forensic evidence that might have been useful was long gone. But the most significant evidence in the case isn't physical at all. It's behavioral. And the behavior patterns that emerged from the investigation paint a picture of a family with secrets, a woman under pressure, and a system that failed to protect two innocent children. Daniel's own behavior, while suspicious to outside observers, follows a consistent pattern when viewed through the lens of his relationship with Malaya. Every lie he told, every misdirection he provided, every time he protected her from scrutiny, it all serves one purpose: shielding the woman he loved from consequences he believed she couldn't handle. "I knew she was fragile," Daniel admitted in later interviews. "I knew that if the pressure got too intense, she would break. And I was right. Look what happened when she finally did break." But Malaya's family exhibited a different pattern of behavior entirely. Where Daniel was protecting out of love, they seemed to be protecting out of fear. Their actions suggested they weren't just worried about Malaya's mental health, they were worried about what she might reveal if she cracked under pressure. The family's behavior around the blanket evidence is particularly telling. According to Daniel, they had been searching areas that hadn't been officially designated as search zones. They had been asking questions about evidence collection procedures. They had been coordinating their stories in ways that suggested prior planning rather than spontaneous cooperation. "They knew too much," Daniel said. "They knew things that only someone involved in the disappearance would know." The investigation also revealed a pattern of communication between family members that raised red flags. Phone records showed frequent calls between Malaya and her mother Cindy in the weeks before the children disappeared. Text messages revealed discussions about keeping the kids safe and doing what's necessary. But the most damning evidence came from financial records. In the months before the disappearance, there had been unusual activity in accounts linked to Malaya and her family. Large cash withdrawals, purchases of camping equipment, payments to individuals with no clear connection to the family's normal activities. Someone was planning something, one investigator noted. The question is whether it was a rescue operation or something much worse. The reservation where Malaya was believed to be hiding presents its own evidentiary challenges. Jurisdictional issues make it difficult for outside law enforcement to conduct thorough searches. The terrain is vast and difficult to navigate. And the community, while not necessarily hostile to outside law enforcement, has its own reasons for being cautious about cooperating with investigations. But the reservation also presents an opportunity. If Malaya is hiding there with Meadow, if she's planning to reunite with Jack and Lilly, then someone in that community knows something. The question is whether they can be convinced to come forward with information. The most intriguing evidence comes from an unexpected source: security cameras from businesses along the route between the family home and the reservation. While most of the footage has been reviewed without finding Malaya or the children, there are gaps in coverage that correspond to times when someone traveling that route could have avoided detection. It's like someone mapped out the blind spots, one investigator observed. They knew exactly where the cameras were and how to avoid them. This level of planning suggests that Malaya's flight wasn't spontaneous. It was part of a larger plan that had been developing for months, possibly even before the children disappeared. The evidence suggests that the disappearance and the flight were connected events, part of a coordinated effort to remove the children from their normal lives permanently. But the evidence also raises disturbing questions about the timeline of events. If Malaya had been planning to flee with all 3 children, why did she wait so long to take Meadow? Why did she allow herself to be monitored by CPS for months before making her move? The answer might lie in the phone call Daniel mentioned, the one that triggered Malaya's final breakdown and flight. Phone records show that she received a call from an unknown number just hours before she violated CPS protocols and fled with Meadow. The call lasted less than 5 minutes, but it was enough to change everything. Who made that call? What did they say? And why did it trigger such a dramatic response? These questions remain unanswered, but they suggest that Malaya's flight wasn't just about avoiding immediate consequences. It was about avoiding something much worse, something that was coming whether she ran or not. The evidence in this case tells a story of careful planning, family coordination, and deliberate deception. It suggests that the disappearance of Jack and Lilly Sullivan wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. It was a calculated act by people who believed they had no other choice. But evidence can be interpreted in different ways. The same financial records that suggest planning could also indicate preparation for a legitimate relocation. The same communication patterns that suggest coordination could also indicate normal family support during a crisis. The truth is that the evidence in this case is like a puzzle with missing pieces. Each piece that's found reveals part of the picture, but the complete image remains frustratingly out of reach. And with each day that passes, more pieces disappear, more evidence is lost, more opportunities for justice slip away. The question that haunts investigators is whether they have enough evidence to solve this case, or whether the truth will remain hidden forever. The answer may depend on whether they can find Malaya and Meadow before it's too late, and whether they can convince someone in that family to finally tell the truth about what happened to Jack and Lilly Sullivan. The Jack and Lilly Sullivan case has revealed a web of deception so complex that untangling it requires understanding not just what happened, but who was involved, who was protecting whom, and why. As the investigation has progressed, it's become clear that this wasn't the work of one person acting alone. This was a family conspiracy, carefully coordinated and ruthlessly executed. At the center of this web sits Malaya Brooks Murray, but she's not the spider. She's just another fly caught in someone else's trap. The real architects of this deception are the family members who have been pulling the strings from the beginning, manipulating events, controlling information, and ensuring that the truth remains hidden. Daniel's revelations about Malaya's mother, Cindy, paint a picture of a woman who wields tremendous influence over her daughter. The 5-minute conversation in the ambulance that transformed Malaya from cooperative to hostile wasn't casual family support. It was a mother giving her daughter very specific instructions about what to say, what not to say, and how to behave. Cindy controls everything, Daniel revealed in subsequent interviews. Malaya can't make a decision without her mother's approval. She can't even go to the bathroom without checking with Cindy first. But Cindy's influence extends beyond just controlling Malaya's behavior. According to Daniel, she's been the one coordinating the family's response to the investigation, deciding who talks to police, who appears in public, and who stays hidden. She's been the one managing the narrative, ensuring that the family's story remains consistent even when the facts don't support it. The evidence suggests that Cindy's involvement goes back to the very beginning of this case. Financial records show that she had been transferring money to Malaya in the weeks before the children disappeared. Phone records reveal that she had been in constant contact with family members who lived near the reservation where Malaya was believed to be hiding. And witness statements indicate that she had been asking questions about how missing persons investigations work, how evidence is collected, and how long it takes for cases to go cold. But Cindy wasn't acting alone. The family conspiracy includes at least 3 other family members who have been actively involved in covering up what happened to Jack and Lilly. One of them is Malaya's male cousin, who Daniel believes was present on the morning the children disappeared.
He was there, Daniel said.
I know he was there because of things that were said, things that were moved, things that only he would know about. The male cousin theory explains several puzzling aspects of the case. It explains how 2 children could have been removed from the property without anyone in the immediate family being directly involved. It explains why the family stories about that morning have inconsistencies that suggest someone else was present. And it explains why certain family members have been so adamant about controlling the investigation. But the cousin's involvement raises disturbing questions about motive. Why would he risk everything to help Malaya hide her children? What did he gain from participating in this deception? And what was his relationship to Jack and Lilly that made him willing to make them disappear? The answers to these questions lie in the family's dark history, a history that includes allegations of abuse, substance problems, and criminal behavior that goes back generations. This isn't a family that trusts law enforcement or government agencies. This is a family that has learned to protect itself by any means necessary, including making problems disappear permanently. Daniel's current status adds another layer to this web of deception. Officially, he's cooperating with the investigation. Unofficially, he's been isolated from the family, cut off from information, and effectively neutralized as a threat to their conspiracy. His appearance in the live stream wasn't just a desperate attempt to find his daughter. It was a declaration of war against the family that had excluded him from their plans. They don't trust me anymore, Daniel admitted. They know I'll tell the truth, and the truth is the one thing they can't afford to have come out. But Daniel's isolation has also revealed cracks in the family's unity. Without his protection, without his willingness to mislead investigators, the family has had to rely more heavily on their own deception. And the more they've had to lie, the more their stories have diverged from reality. The photograph that changed everything emerged from these growing inconsistencies. According to Daniel, it was a picture that he had never seen before, showing family members in a location that none of them had claimed to visit. The timestamp on the photo corresponded to a date when those family members had told investigators they were elsewhere, doing something completely different. That photograph proved they were lying, Daniel said. Not just about that day, but about everything. If they lied about being in that location, what else did they lie about? The photograph's significance goes beyond just proving deception. The location shown in the image is significant. It's a remote area near the reservation where Malaya was believed to be hiding. The people in the photograph are significant. They include family members who had claimed to have no knowledge of Malaya's whereabouts. And the timing is significant. The photograph was taken weeks before Malaya's official flight, suggesting that her escape had been planned and coordinated long before anyone realized she was missing. But the most disturbing aspect of the photograph is what it suggests about the family's long-term plans. If they were scouting locations and coordinating activities weeks before Malaya's flight, it suggests that they weren't just helping her hide temporarily. They were helping her disappear permanently. The web of deception extends beyond just the immediate family. Investigation has revealed that there are at least 5 other individuals who have been providing support, resources, and assistance to the family's conspiracy. These include friends, extended family members, and community members who have been willing to lie to investigators, hide evidence, and obstruct justice. It's like a small army, one investigator observed. They've got people providing money, transportation, housing, false identification, and anything else they need to stay hidden. But maintaining this level of conspiracy requires constant coordination and communication. And with each additional person involved, the risk of exposure increases. Phone records, financial transactions, and witness statements create a paper trail that's becoming increasingly difficult to hide. The investigation has also revealed that the family's deception wasn't limited to just hiding the children. They've been actively working to frame Daniel for the disappearance, planting evidence, creating false witnesses, and spreading rumors designed to make him look guilty. "They try to make me the fall guy," Daniel said. "They figured if everyone was focused on me, no one would look too closely at what they were doing." The sweaters that Daniel claimed were stolen from his house were found in locations that implicated him in the children's disappearance. Anonymous tips led investigators to search areas where Daniel had supposedly been seen with the children. Witnesses came forward with stories about Daniel's allegedly suspicious behavior that couldn't be corroborated, but couldn't be definitively disproven either. But the family's efforts to frame Daniel may have backfired. By focusing so much attention on making him look guilty, they may have inadvertently revealed the sophistication of their own conspiracy. The level of planning and coordination required to plant evidence and create false witnesses suggests resources and capabilities that go far beyond what a single desperate mother could manage on her own. The current investigation has shifted focus from finding the children to unraveling the conspiracy that made them disappear. Law enforcement agencies are now looking at financial records, communication patterns, and behavioral analysis to understand how this family managed to coordinate such an elaborate deception. But time is running out. Every day that passes makes it more likely that the conspiracy will succeed, that the truth will remain hidden, and that Jack and Lilly Sullivan will never be found. The question is whether investigators can break through the web of deception before it's too late. The answer may depend on whether they can find the one person who might be willing to tell the truth. Malaya herself, isolated from her family, under tremendous pressure, and facing the loss of her remaining child, she may be the key to unraveling the conspiracy that has consumed her life. But finding her means finding Meadow. And in a case where nothing is as it seems, where every revelation only deepens the mystery, the question remains, will they find them before the web of deception claims another victim? As we reach the end of this investigation into the Jack and Lilly Sullivan case, we're left with more questions than answers. 6 months after 2 innocent children vanished from their home, the case remains unsolved, the children remain missing, and the web of deception continues to grow more complex with each passing day. The current status of the investigation is both frustrating and heartbreaking. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police have expanded their search to include multiple provinces, tribal lands, and even international borders. They've interviewed hundreds of witnesses, analyzed thousands of pieces of evidence, and followed up on countless tips from the public. But despite these massive efforts, Jack and Lilly Sullivan remain missing. Malaya Brooks Murray and her daughter Meadow are still considered fugitives from justice. The last confirmed sighting of them was near the reservation where Daniel believed they were hiding, but even that sighting is now weeks old and may have been inaccurate. The terrain they've disappeared into is vast, remote, and difficult to search effectively. Without cooperation from local communities and tribal authorities, finding them may be impossible. Daniel Martel's current situation is perhaps the most tragic aspect of this entire case. He's lost the 2 children he was trying to protect, he's been separated from his biological daughter, and he's been branded by some as a suspect in their disappearance. His decision to speak publicly about the case has made him a target for both family retaliation and public suspicion. "I've lost everything," Daniel said in a recent interview. "The kids I loved are gone.
My daughter is gone.
The woman I loved has become someone I don't recognize. And I don't know if any of them are ever coming home." But Daniel hasn't given up hope. He continues to cooperate with investigators, continues to provide information about the family's behavior and possible locations, and continues to believe that Jack and Lilly are still alive somewhere, waiting to be found. The investigation has revealed disturbing patterns that extend far beyond just this one case. The family's ability to coordinate such an elaborate deception, to maintain silence among multiple participants, and to successfully hide from law enforcement for months suggests capabilities that may have been used before. Investigators are now looking into other missing persons cases in the region, other unsolved disappearances that may be connected to this family's activities. The question is whether Jack and Lilly Sullivan are the first children to disappear into this web of deception, or whether there have been others whose stories have never been told. The psychological impact of this case extends far beyond the immediate family. The community where Jack and Lilly lived has been traumatized by their disappearance. Neighbors question whether they could have done more to protect the children. Teachers wonder whether they missed warning signs. Social workers struggle with the knowledge that the system failed to keep two innocent children safe. But perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of this case is what it reveals about the children themselves. Jack and Lilly Sullivan were just ordinary kids living ordinary lives until they were swept up in circumstances beyond their control. They were victims of adult decisions, adult deceptions, and adult failures that they had no power to prevent or escape. The evidence suggests that they may still be alive, hidden somewhere in the vast wilderness of northern Canada. If that's true, then they're living lives completely cut off from everything they once knew, their friends, their school, their community, their normal childhood. They're growing up in isolation, possibly not even knowing that people are looking for them, that there are people who love them and want them to come home. The unanswered questions in this case are numerous and disturbing. Why did Malaya decide to make her children disappear? What role did her family play in planning and executing their disappearance? Are Jack and Lilly still alive? And if so, where are they being kept? What happened to the evidence that disappeared from the crime scene? And perhaps most importantly, what will it take to bring these children home? The theories about what happened to Jack and Lilly fall into several categories, each more disturbing than the last. The first theory is that they were taken by their mother as part of a planned escape from a life she could no longer handle. In this scenario, the children are alive but living under assumed identities in a remote location, possibly never knowing the truth about their past. The second theory is that they were taken by family members who believed they were protecting them from some perceived threat. This theory suggests that the children are being hidden by people who genuinely believe they're acting in their best interests, even if their methods are illegal and harmful. The third theory is the one that nobody wants to consider, but that investigators must confront, that the children were killed to prevent them from revealing family secrets. This theory suggests that Jack and Lilly knew something that made them a threat to the family's carefully constructed lies, and that their disappearance was a permanent solution to a temporary problem. The evidence supports elements of all three theories, but definitive proof remains elusive. The financial records suggest planning for a long-term disappearance. The family's behavior suggests coordination and secrecy. And the complete absence of the children from any surveillance systems or witness accounts suggests that they may no longer be alive to be seen. But there's another possibility that investigators are now considering, that this case isn't about the children at all. What if Jack and Lilly were just collateral damage in a larger family conflict? What if their disappearance was designed to punish Daniel, to hurt him in the most devastating way possible? This theory explains why the family worked so hard to frame Daniel for the disappearance. It explains why they cut off his access to information and excluded him from their conspiracy. And it explains why they allowed him to suffer for months, watching him struggle with guilt and grief, before finally revealing that they had been working against him all along. The investigation has also revealed disturbing details about the family's past that provide context for their current actions. There are allegations of abuse, neglect, and criminal behavior that go back generations. There are patterns of family members disappearing when they become inconvenient or threatening. And there are suggestions that this family has been solving problems through violence and deception for decades. But perhaps most disturbing of all is the realization that the system failed these children long before they disappeared. Child Protective Services had been involved with the family for years. Teachers had reported concerns about the children's welfare. Neighbors had made complaints about their living conditions. And yet, despite all these warning signs, no one was able to protect Jack and Lilly from the fate that awaited them. As we reach the end of this investigation into the Jack and Lilly Sullivan case, we're left with more questions than answers. 6 months after 2 innocent children vanished from their home, the case remains unsolved, the children remain missing, and the web of deception continues to grow more complex with each passing day. The current status of the investigation is both frustrating and heartbreaking. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police have expanded their search to include multiple provinces, tribal lands, and even international borders. They've interviewed hundreds of witnesses, analyzed thousands of pieces of evidence, and followed up on countless tips from the public. But despite these massive efforts, Jack and Lilly Sullivan remain missing. Malaya Brooks Murray and her daughter Meadow are still considered fugitives from justice. The last confirmed sighting of them was near the reservation where Daniel believed they were hiding, but even that sighting is now weeks old and may have been inaccurate. The terrain they've disappeared into is vast, remote, and difficult to search effectively. Without cooperation from local communities and tribal authorities, finding them may be impossible. Daniel Martel's current situation is perhaps the most tragic aspect of this entire case. He's lost the 2 children he was trying to protect, he's been separated from his biological daughter, and he's been branded by some as a suspect in their disappearance. His decision to speak publicly about the case has made him a target for both family retaliation and public suspicion. "I've lost everything," Daniel said in a recent interview. "The kids I loved are gone.
My daughter is gone.
The woman I loved has become someone I don't recognize. And I don't know if any of them are ever coming home." But Daniel hasn't given up hope. He continues to cooperate with investigators, continues to provide information about the family's behavior and possible locations, and continues to believe that Jack and Lilly are still alive somewhere, waiting to be found. The investigation has revealed disturbing patterns that extend far beyond just this one case. The family's ability to coordinate such an elaborate deception, to maintain silence among multiple participants, and to successfully hide from law enforcement for months suggests capabilities that may have been used before. Investigators are now looking into other missing persons cases in the region, other unsolved disappearances that may be connected to this family's activities. The question is whether Jack and Lilly Sullivan are the first children to disappear into this web of deception, or whether there have been others whose stories have never been told. The psychological impact of this case extends far beyond the immediate family. The community where Jack and Lilly lived has been traumatized by their disappearance. Neighbors question whether they could have done more to protect the children. Teachers wonder whether they missed warning signs. Social workers struggle with the knowledge that the system failed to keep 2 innocent children safe. But perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of this case is what it reveals about the children themselves. Jack and Lilly Sullivan were just ordinary kids living ordinary lives until they were swept up in circumstances beyond their control. They were victims of adult decisions, adult deceptions, and adult failures that they had no power to prevent or escape. The evidence suggests that they may still be alive, hidden somewhere in the vast wilderness of northern Canada. If that's true, then they're living lives completely cut off from everything they once knew, their friends, their school, their community, their normal childhood. They're growing up in isolation, possibly not even knowing that people are looking for them, that there are people who love them and want them to come home. The unanswered questions in this case are numerous and disturbing. Why did Malaya decide to make her children disappear? What role did her family play in planning and executing their disappearance? Are Jack and Lilly still alive? And if so, where are they being kept? What happened to the evidence that disappeared from the crime scene? And perhaps most importantly, what will it take to bring these children home? The theories about what happened to Jack and Lilly fall into several categories, each more disturbing than the last. The first theory is that they were taken by their mother as part of a planned escape from a life she could no longer handle. In this scenario, the children are alive but living under assumed identities in a remote location, possibly never knowing the truth about their past. The second theory is that they were taken by family members who believed they were protecting them from some perceived threat. This theory suggests that the children are being hidden by people who genuinely believe they're acting in their best interests, even if their methods are illegal and harmful. The third theory is the one that nobody wants to consider, but that investigators must confront, that the children were killed to prevent them from revealing family secrets. This theory suggests that Jack and Lilly knew something that made them a threat to the family's carefully constructed lives, and that their disappearance was a permanent solution to a temporary problem. The evidence supports elements of all 3 theories, but definitive proof remains elusive. The financial records suggest planning for a long-term disappearance. The family's behavior suggests coordination and secrecy. And the complete absence of the children from any surveillance systems or witness accounts suggests that they may no longer be alive to be seen. But there's another possibility that investigators are now considering, that this case isn't about the children at all. What if Jack and Lilly were just collateral damage in a larger family conflict? What if their disappearance was designed to punish Daniel, to hurt him in the most devastating way possible? This theory explains why the family worked so hard to frame Daniel for the disappearance. It explains why they cut off his access to information and excluded him from their conspiracy. And it explains why they allowed him to suffer for months, watching him struggle with guilt and grief, before finally revealing that they had been working against him all along. The investigation has also revealed disturbing details about the family's past that provide context for their current actions. There are allegations of abuse, neglect, and criminal behavior that go back generations. There are patterns of family members disappearing when they become inconvenient or threatening. And there are suggestions that this family has been solving problems through violence and deception for decades. But perhaps most disturbing of all is the realization that the system failed these children long before they disappeared. Child Protective Services had been involved with the family for years. Teachers had reported concerns about the children's welfare. Neighbors had made complaints about their living conditions. And yet, despite all these warning signs, no one was able to protect Jack and Lilly from the fate that awaited them.